can see it.
Yeah.
That's good. At least I don't have to worry about plugging in and all that good stuff.
Hold on.
Yeah.
It says there is a problem with the USB. Slow presentation. That's yours.
Yep.
That should be yours, right?
Yeah. It's just Schlosser. It's the same name as the last.
Schlosser or Schlosser?
Oh, you mean in terms of how to pronounce it?
Yeah.
I say Schlosser. I make it very American.
Schlosser. Okay.
Very Americanized.
Okay. Okay. Deleted. Reinstated. Reopen. Okay, man. Yeah, BAC need to break down today. How about that?
First-hand glimpses to what global warming will feel like.
Yeah.
People that don't have air conditioning.
Maybe you should say something about that.
Just like if you scroll ahead.
Nice to meet you, Wim. So you.
Wim! Nice to see
so
you
much for
finally.
hosting
Yeah,
us today.
absolutely. Glad to be here.
What is going on? It's not doing it right. Okay. Open with. Yep. There.
Go. Great.
Good.
All right. I just wanted to add a few sort of refinements to what we were talking about.
Put it over there. Reserve.
Okay. It's funny, I was driving in.
Yeah.
There was a diesel store that pushed us outside.
Exactly. It could have been a pretty good basis. Well, you know what? Better to be overdressed than the alternative. All right, finally. Okay.
So have you been on campus?
Yeah. Yeah. And now I'm boiling because
Where's some?
till look.
So we're going to start in a couple of minutes. Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Horacio Caperan. I'm the Executive Director for External Affairs of the MIT Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change. Dear Excellency, Minister, President, dear Mrs. Claire Tillekerts, dear Belgian delegation members, dear guests. On behalf of the MIT Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change, welcome to the session, The Battle for Tech Dominance. Can a decentralized web restore the global balance? We are delighted and honored that you chose to be here today for the discussion and networking to help us learn more about the importance of bringing people and their data together and about your leadership working to make it happen. The session will start with words from the Minister President, John Jambon, followed by our keynote speakers, Mr. Max Virgoli, Executive Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at IMEC, and Dr. Adam Schlosser, Deputy Director of the MIT Joint Program. The event will close with a panel discussion moderated by Wim Sawyer, who will end the event around 4:30 p.m. Wim, thank you so much to you and the team for putting this event together. Now, it is my honor to invite to the podium Mr. President John Jambon. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, I would like to start by thanking Mr. Caperan of the MIT Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change for hosting here today this Belgian economic mission. Also thanks to Max Virgoli, the Executive Vice President of IMEC. Flanders has close relations with America's largest tech corporations and America's finest institutes. And American corporations are instrumental in the prosperity of Flanders. We thank you for this excellent relationship. Today, Flanders is among the world's best in the field of biotech and health tech. We now have the ambition to climb to the top of data tech. With technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things and smart data services, we will be able to make the difference. We are already world-class players in the development of silicon and of course refer to IMEC and their partnerships with international players as Samsung and Intel and others. We definitely want to obtain that same kind of leading position in the data economy. And what better place to discuss these ambitions than here in Boston at MIT. Let us discuss how the strong relationship between Flanders and Boston has the potential to change the world. Let us show the world how data is managed, shared and leveraged to solve societal challenges, while realizing that citizens are in full control about their own personal data. I truly believe that combined we have the joint knowledge, the vision and the skills to make this happen in the coming years. With the open source content management system Drupal, we have done it together before, in close partnership with Boston-based Acquia. 15% of the websites worldwide now run on Drupal. Looking forward to one example of innovative policy of my government is the creation of a data utility company in Flanders, an initiative for which we work closely with experts from the Flemish universities, IMEC, Vito and Interrupt. And I have to say what we want to do with the data utility company is to solve the so-called data paradox. We all want to use more data, more apps on our smartphones, more applications, but from the other side we see a growing reluctancy from people to share their data with others. And so the data utility company is in the middle of this paradox to try to make data run, and data can stay safe and in control of the people who deliver the data. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited about what lies ahead, and rephrasing Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the future is still so much bigger than the past. I look forward to learning from the distinguished speakers today on the opportunities of tomorrow. I thank you and I wish you a fruitful session.
Thank you for your words, Mr. President. And now, I would like to invite to the podium Mr. Max Mirgoli, please.
Mr. Minister President, welcome to the United States. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and fostering a relationship between United States and Flanders. I would be remiss if I did not thank Madam Tellecart for your hard work over the so many years. It's been 10 years we were together in San Diego. Your efforts with all the talented people of FIT have been instrumental in the growth of partnerships of IMEC in the United States and across the globe. We are thankful for what you have done. Please continue. Thank you. About 38 years ago, the foresight and wisdom of government of Flanders gave a gift to the technical community, which MIT is one of the birthplaces of technical acumens around the globe. And that foresight created IMEC. To this date, the commitment of government of Flanders has been second to none and a model for all other governments to learn from. And I can tell you this by having been in Washington, D.C. recently. They are at awe of the creation of IMEC, which has been a foresight of the government of Flanders. And the commitment to today has been something that is a model that all of the countries are trying to model after. IMEC's mission is to solve society's great challenges through technology that we develop together with our partners and 5,000 talented scientists from over 95 nationalities. Again, thanks to the government of Flanders and the foresight, we have come to have a one-of-a-kind infrastructure from around the globe that is over 12,000 square meters of state-of-the-art clean room, where the 5,000 plus top scientists from around the globe can create magic together with over 1,000 partners that we have from around the globe. IMEC, because of these three pillars, has become a unique driving engine behind all of the innovations that you see, and the birthplace, again, is Flanders, that is reaching out across the globe. Our mission is to connect the smart applications and challenges through advanced semiconductors and solve society's big challenges. We connect, being in the MIT, in the birthplace of one of the best universities around the globe. We connect universities, we connect governments, and we connect industry. We are the catalyst for innovation between all of these. If you see what is being disrupted today and our lives being improved because of that disruption, it's a smart everything. Smart health, smart mobility, smart cities. And the genesis behind all of that is actually the foundational technology that IMEC creates using semiconductors. IMEC has uniquely been placed in a way that we can tackle all of the challenges and enable the disruptive force that creates the new paradigms in smart health, smart mobility, and smart everything else around us. The way we go about it is that we have two pillars. One is based on fundamental deep technology, and the other one is about software and hardware. Together, in the campus of IMEC, with our infrastructure and our partners, we create technologies that have in mind the sustainable goals of United Nations. If you look at the way we work together and how we create this technology, and Minister President referred to the data economy that is being created. The data economy is a byproduct of the semiconductors. We have three ways of working together with our partners. We collaborate in R&D, we do development for our partners, and we also create spin-offs and venturing. If you look at the collaborations that IMEC does, using our scientists and our partnerships and our infrastructure, we develop next generation of technologies that can solve society's challenges way ahead of time, such as chips that they derive AI engines, such as semiconductor roadmaps, and last but not least, quantum computing, which is something that we will all need to solve big challenges in a shorter period of time. As an example, the chip that we developed for spiking neural networks is a chip that can be used in smart mobility for solving sensor fusion problems of the car with very low power consumption. We work together to bring state-of-the-art technology with our partners to the market. And what IMEC has done over the last 38 years has been to take a systematic development of technology and create a network effect with our partners to go faster and more cost-effectively. You may ask, why are you guys doing that? It's very interesting. I don't know if you are aware of it, but for every 200 smartphones, you need a server rack. And if you look at the server rack, what drives the server rack is the chip technology that is inside the server rack. Clearly, the chip technology in there, both from the performance and from the memory side of it, needs to be continuously improved to have better performance and better power consumption. And that is what we do with our partners at IMEC. One of the challenges that exists as consumers and as people who are consuming technology has been driving the Moore's law, which is the guiding principle of the semiconductor industry, which is power, performance, area, and cost. But today we also look at the sustainability and the impact on the environment, together with our partners. As I mentioned, besides improving the performance of the chips that they are running the servers and creating the cloud, we also need to create out-of-the-box thinkings. And one of the ideas that we're working on, and this is to show you how far ahead we are thinking, is to use DNA for storing archival memory that is used for items that you don't retrieve every day. Now, the beauty of DNA, and this has been proven already, that a complete movie has been stored on one strand of DNA. It takes a long time for us to develop the process to make it useful for the industry. And that's the type of pioneering work that we do at IMEC. As far as the development is concerned, we develop together with our partners chips that are for specific applications. One of the applications was in the schools at Flanders to create a personalized learning. This is an example of a public-private partnership between IMEC, startups, and the government to improve lives of the society through technology. As far as the venturing is concerned, IMEC has created a fund that we are now into the second version of it. And with the fund, we try to encourage and foster our startups to become big unicorns, not only in Flanders, but across the globe. You may ask the question, how did IMEC become the organization that it is today? The guiding principles of IMEC is integrity, passion, connectedness, and excellence in what we do. Passion is a fundamental core part of what we do, because if you're not passionate about what you do, you cannot come up with disruptive innovations that you come up with. One of the things I'm passionate about, since we are close to the MIT Health Center nearby, is about the impact that semiconductors, technology can have on the health of the society. A lot of you may not know that the genesis of a personalized medicine relies on sequencing and understanding the genome. And the genome sequencing, the DNA sequencing, the cornerstone of it is based on nanotechnology and chip technology. IMEC works with all of the top sequencing companies around the globe, and we enable the next generation of the sequencing for personalized medicine. But we do more than that. In fact, prior to this event, I had a meeting with the Dean of Engineering of MIT, and he was referring to this device, which we have developed in conjunction with 5 of the top centers around the globe for studying brain. This is called the Neuroprobe, and together we did it with Wellcome Trust, Howard Hughes Medical Foundation, Gatsby Foundation, and it has revolutionized the way you can study the brain. Now, to show you an example that what can Flanders bring to the world, Mission Lucidity is a perfect blend of partnership between KU Leuven, IMEC, VIB, and University Hospital in Leuven. Why is this so close and near to my heart? Because at the end of my father's life, he suffered from Alzheimer. And I can see through the work that I can do, I can make an impact to the better life of an individual who lived their entire life with dignity. And I can see the immediate impact we are making by all the different slew of technologies that we are bringing together with clinicians, with professors from the university, with chip technology from IMEC. We are trying to solve a challenge as big as Alzheimer and dementia. And this is an example of a collaboration between different institutes in Flanders that they all have been very fortunate to have the support of Flemish government. With that, I am grateful for the opportunity to have spoken to you. IMEC is open to all of you. If there is anything IMEC can do to help you in your scientific endeavors, to solve society's challenges, we are there at your disposal, and we would love the opportunity to work with you. Thank you. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Nigoli. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Adam Schlosser from the MIT Joint Program.
Skipping to the part.
Good afternoon, everyone. Your Excellency, Madam, thank you so much. And to the delegates, equally, thank you so much for being here today. It's a privilege and an honor to be addressing you all. And part of my job here today is to sort of explain why you see a lot of these icons here about the MIT Joint Program on the Science and Policy of Global Change and who we are and what we try to do. A good segue between my talk and the previous talk is so I represent a number of faculty members, research scientists, postdoctorates, graduate students, undergraduate students that really deal in the area of prediction of global changes. And I'll talk a little bit more about what global changes means. But a lot of what we do uses the technologies that you've just talked about. So we are very heavy into computation, data acquisition, trying to bring together knowledge that gives people insights and foresights into the future. And with that, these remarks here at the beginning are really to sort of set the stage of what exactly we face when we talk about prediction. And one is prediction is a very fickle beast, particularly when we bring together all of these different elements that I'm going to talk about. And the other recognition is that as a modeler, as someone who is in the business of trying to build prediction tools. Prediction tools are essentially computer source code. We use computers with our knowledge to look at the future. The very simple fact is that we will never achieve 100% accuracy. Our models will be wrong, and that's okay. That's okay. That's not really the issue. The issue is how wrong do they have to be before they become useful? They don't become useful. That really comes down to an issue of data support, which again, hopefully some of my remarks will hopefully set the stage for the panel that's to follow here. And in recognizing the fact that again, models aren't perfect, we have to embrace that simple fact. There's an element here that I'm hopefully going to get into, again, that brings into this issue of data science or data support, how we can make our models better, how we can build consensus in our models. But the very simple fact is that we have to embrace what's called sort of a Monte Carlo approach, which means we have to embrace the fact that there are many plausible futures. And in some sense, we have to be vaguely right rather than think of just a future as one possibility and being precisely wrong. So with that, what is the purpose of me standing here in front of you and the work that we do at the joint program? I probably don't need to spend a lot of time describing and explaining to you all that we live in a world that is rapidly changing. And I'm not just talking about, my background is a quick background. I'm primarily a meteorologist, climate scientist, so I do a lot of work in climate system modeling and weather system modeling. I think a lot about that. I think about extreme events. I think about how that's going to impact our lives. But we also recognize that is just one part of a much bigger, more complex picture. The world is changing as we sit here today and speak in many of the ways that have been spoken about already. And really the idea here is that not only is the world changing, in I think very positive, very, very good ways, we are imparting forces on the world that may not be so savory. And those lead to what we refer to as physical risks in the system. In terms of human forced climate change, I think all of you are very aware of some of the risks that we face and we have to deal with. But in trying to deal with those risks, finding solutions to those risks, we have what we recognize are as transitional risks. We have to transform the way that we live in some very fundamental and very large-scale way. Those are going to carry with them transition risks. Those are risks in all of the resource systems that we think about: power, water, clean air, land that's productive that we can rely on. These are all areas that we're going to have to transform to really get to broad solutions to these challenges. And those transitions have to be just. And that really comes down to a people-to-people, person-to-person impact, which really, again, gets at acquiring data at that granularity. But the idea here is, with all of that knowledge, and we're building knowledge as we speak, is to use that knowledge in a predictive sense to support people to make decisions, to set priorities, to put those priorities into action, and also recognize the fact that, yes, while there are a lot of risks that abound and that are evolving, there are also opportunities. And we need to do that in sustainable and responsible fashion. So that's what we do at the Joint Program. Again, I represent a very broad range of researchers and scientists. Again, by education. I'm a physical scientist, but we also work with economists, with engineers, with policymakers, and again, this idea is to try to use all of this understanding, these tools, these predictions, to help people make more informed decisions and to do it in a sustainable and a prosperous way for us all. What is our model? When I talk about prediction models, what do they look like? Well, this is an example. And if it looks confusing and overwhelming, well, that's intentional. The idea here is, again, the fact that we know that the world is changing. Just the world in which we live in is changing. It has very real impacts on the environment. When I talk about the environment, I'm really sort of focusing on the physical environment, the Earth system environment. But we also have many managed systems to sustain our quality of life, to sustain our population. They all interact in very complex and very interactive ways. They're very complicated, and by that very nature, it falls into this notion of, again, we have to recognize all plausible futures. We have to recognize that there are many different pathways to a certain target, and we have to have a model that is efficient enough, yet comprehensive enough to build all of these prediction tools. And so at the end of the day, when we're exercising this model, and again, this model tries to bring in, again, all the human systems. The human system here is primarily represented as the global economy. There are tools out there, there are models out there that can model the economy in a computable general equilibrium framework. That is what we embrace. And we have Earth system models. We've developed an Earth system model, very much like I'm sure you're all familiar with in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's those class of models. We couple those, we link those in very important ways, not just in terms of emissions, which you're probably all familiar with in terms of human-forced climate change, but we also recognize that humans affect all of these other systems that are important. Land systems, water systems, the quality of our air. These are elements of our environment that we rely on for quality of health and for prosperous life. We put all that into the model. At the end of the day, again, while embracing these sort of plausible futures, we end up with what you see on the right there, which are distributions of outcomes. You see the curves on the right with probably some of you are familiar with probability distributions. Those are the types of outputs that we get in a raw form with our model. But what we like to do is to transform that into roulette wheels and to sort of present that as a gamble. This is a gamble that we're all participating in. And the question is what wheel do you want to spin in that gamble? The shape and the structure of that wheel is going to rely very much upon what policies we put into play, what policies we embrace, what policies we meet the targets on, and how does that all play out, again, in this very complex, complicated way of connecting all of these elements. So a little bit about uncertainty. Again, all models are wrong. The question is not why they're wrong or how wrong they are, but how useful they can be. Well, in dealing with that, we're dealing with this sort of fundamental nature of uncertainty. And to be clear, uncertainty for most people might be regarded as, well, that means that you don't know anything. No, not necessarily. For scientists, it's actually the exact opposite. Uncertainty is about what we know amidst all of this complexity. What can we actually do with our models, and what do we know? Can we bound everything that we know in terms of plausible outcomes? And so that is really, in terms of our framework, when we think about, again, these two key components of our model, the human system model, and this says climate uncertainties, but it's more of the Earth system uncertainties. We have the data now to quantify all of that known behavior of these systems. It all comes down to data, right? And the lack of data doesn't allow us to bound these uncertainties. And that's, I think, where the real opportunity comes in, I think, in terms of a lot of the conversations we're having today is how can we take advantages of new technologies to bring us more data that we simply don't have? What examples am I talking about? This slide here is to give you a summary of one approach that we're taking with our framework, and it's what we refer to as triaging. And triaging risks across what we know are many different landscapes. Again, I mentioned before, we are in a world that is constantly growing in many different ways. And so how we view all of this is a layering of landscapes, different landscapes of risk. These can be physical risks, these can be transition risks, these can be risks across socio-demographics or in terms of systemic racism or just transitions. The challenge here is how can we use the data that we have, or the data we have access to create these landscapes and allow people, not just scientists, but citizen scientists or open science platform, how can we provide this data so that people themselves can educate what they want to know about all of these risks and how they may come together and compound and magnify. So in terms of this platform that you see here, there's a URL listed here. I encourage all of you to visit this. We have a feedback tab. We'd love to hear any of your comments. But for its current implementation, we have scoured the internet of things, if you will, and have come across literally hundreds of variables that we've collected, we've quality controlled, and we focused primarily over the contiguous US, but we've now moved into a global platform. And again, the idea here is to look across all this data to build metrics that give you an idea of where risks are now. And in doing that, we also recognize that these risks, again, these physical, transition, you name it, also can impact critical infrastructure. And we need to overlay and we need to integrate that critical infrastructure to these different landscapes of risk. In addition to that, we also recognize that, again, this is not just an issue of a climate issue. This is an issue of how this may impact people in a just or an unjust way. We need to think about impacts on human health and on socio-demographic indicators. And how do we harmonize all that? How do we bring that together to build what we refer to as a triage assessment? Now, triage, I don't mean that necessarily in the battlefield medical context. This is much more a sort of a business-oriented sense, which is, can we provide a screening tool that allows anyone, again, it could be scientists, citizen scientists, the community at large, but an open source platform that allows people to combine different landscapes that they covet or they think that are important and provide hotspot indications, hotspot indicators of where all these different landscapes of risk come together to give you an indication of where you need to take deeper dives and think about more granular solutions. An example of that is at the bottom. And if you just sort of follow this from left to right, what it's simply showing you is that if someone were to come onto this website and think, well, I'm very interested in these physical risks to water systems, land systems, or air quality, where would the hotspots be in terms of risk right now? If you went to our platform and combined those metrics, you would get something like you see on the left-hand panel. And I could spend another 20 minutes explaining to you why I would expect those, but I'm not going to do that.
Well, actually, you do have 45 minutes of panel.
So we can talk about it in the panel. Again, to the points that I've made is, if you're thinking about this in, again, a little bit more complex or comprehensive way, you might also be thinking about transition risks. And in that case, you might think about, well, where is the fossil industry right now? And if we were to think about a big transformation of energy systems away from fossil industry and into low carbon technologies, where might there be transition risks? And if you add that into the landscape, you start to see that these hotspots begin to move. And again, these are in very expected ways, which we can talk about later. Finally, if you really want to bring in just transitions, if you want to think about how these impact people in a just transition context, you can add things like employment, poverty, race profiles. That gives you the rightmost landscape. And hopefully when you go from left to right, you can see very dramatic shifts in these hotspots. And it gives you a very different context and a very different landscape of where you might view risks, or the most important risks to be, and where you need to focus and do deeper dive analysis. That is really the spirit of this tool. And what I'd like to do to connect, I think, with what's been spoken today and what will probably be addressed in the panel is, as you can tell, this platform right now is done on a county-by-county level over the United States, and as data is available to us for the globe, we were going to bring it down to as low a granular, spatial granularity as we can. If we truly want to get this down to a person-to-person level, we need to start embracing technologies that we just don't have access to, which is, and I was going to bring my phone up for a dramatic effect, but I don't have my phone, but all of you, I think, are holding them right now. So if we can get this sort of information accessed from people in a way that, again, is fair, just, has the appropriate security measures in place, and allow people to engage in these types of platforms, this would be a transformative way of getting this type of information down to a very, very granular level, and something that I think a lot of us, at least in our scientific community, would be very excited about. So with that, I will close. A lot of the bullets here are points that I've already made, but I would just close by saying, just again to segue into our panel discussion, hopefully some of the comments that I've shared with you today give you an appreciation that we still, at least in terms of the prediction of things, and if we're going to predict things like global changes and how we're going to solve these global changes, more and more I think we're beginning to realize that as more and more complex our models become, and as more and more granular they need to be to really get at solutions, we are in a data-starved situation. We need more data that's targeted, that's granular, that's sector-specific, and we just need more data. So with that, thank you. I'll escape that. Oh, didn't.
So we have heard from Mr. Max Migoli, we heard from Dr. Schlosser. One of your final sentences was all the technology that is not yet available. I heard Max talk about all the technologies that are in pipeline, but I would like to welcome our distinguished panelists on stage to discuss further about data, about the technology dominance, and if we can rebalance the global web by using the data initiatives in the pipeline. So can I please welcome to the stage Professor Ruben Verborg from Ghent University, Dr. Bruce Schneier, a fellow at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and Dr. Adam Schlosser, we already have on stage, of course, and Mr. John Bruce, CEO of Inroad. Thank you. With a warm welcome. So I would like to invite our for the Belgian audience to be very interactive and to raise your hands the moment you have a question, because these are very distinguished gentlemen. They have lots of experience in speaking in public. So the more you can challenge them, the better. So first and foremost, I'm not going to make a futile attempt in introducing you properly. I'm going to ask you to do that yourself. Professor Verborg, could you please introduce yourself, and then we'll go round robin around the stage, after which we will start the questioning.
Hi everyone, I'm Ruben. I'm a researcher in computer science at Ghent University, also researcher at IMAC, and I'd like to think about what the future for data looks like.
I'm Bruce Schneier. I'm a security technologist. I work at the intersection of security technology and people, and teach at the public policy school down the road.
Please.
Hi, I'm John Bruce. I'm the CEO of a company called Inroad that I co-founded with a chap called Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the original web. And our job is to see if we can't put it back to where he originally imagined it could get to. So I'm thrilled to be here today and talk to you all about particularly what we're doing in Flanders, actually, with the support of Minister President Jan Bon and Eric and others in the room here, including Ruben, who are very helpful in that mission. So delightful to be here.
Wow, that's amazing. That's the shortest introductions I have ever heard in the US. I was expecting at least 5 minutes each here.
Well, I had a 15-minute introduction.
Okay. Wonderful. So maybe a first question here to get the discussion started. Professor Verborg, you have a history here at MIT. You're back in Belgium, of course, now. But you were closely involved at the Oranges when the Inroad company was formed and the SOLID initiative was technically developed scientifically. Could you share a little bit about the origins of the SOLID initiative, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just a regular guy living in a small town in Flanders, and I had an idea. And my idea was that we need something bigger than big data. Now the truth is, if you have an idea in most places in the world, this is where it ends. Well, in Flanders, like Flanders has invested in research for the future of data, and they have funded me to come to MIT back in 2017, and I could just do that. I could just speak with Sir Tim Berners-Lee and join his team to work on things. Because not only did I get the opportunity, we were known to be a team that had good technology. So I came here in 2017, working with Sir Tim on what is to be the next generation of the web and how we do data. And the interesting bit is that those ideas that some of us were having individually in different places came together here. So it was like a very fruitful place to be at. But even more interesting was that when I left MIT, I took a seed with me. The idea of Solid, a new way to think about data, and I brought the seed to Flanders. And within Flanders we kind of had a perfect storm. Our research was ready for that, our government was ready for that, and the minds of the people and companies were ready to do something with that idea. And in Flanders, this seed has found a very fertile soil to start blossoming into what now has become quite a big tree, or quite a forest actually at the moment. And this is what I like so much about this story. Like, you can go from just being just a guy in Flanders to somebody who gets to travel all the way to MIT and bring an idea back, and it doesn't stop there. The idea becomes bigger than what you originally had intended. And this is why I'm so happy to be back here today. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruben. Fascinating. So let's go to the other extreme of the table. Let's go to Mr. Bruce. You have kind of another point of view. You have had serious exit before. You sold your company to IBM in the past. And right now, could you tell us a little bit how you got involved in the initiative? How did you end up in this company called Inrupt?
Yeah, well, not to bore you too much, but you know, my background's along one of startups, originally in Silicon Valley, then over here, and so my fifth startup, the number of them have been acquired. The last one was acquired by IBM, and actually Bruce here was my CTO in that company, and we defined a new way to do cybersecurity that nobody had ever done before, which was quite exciting. Anyway, one day I was invited to have dinner with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and who wouldn't? I mean, the man invented the web. He's got to have some interesting stories to tell. So over dinner, he you know, a bit like that guy in the movie. You know, he was offered the red pill and the blue pill, and I took the pill of the right color, and my eyes were somewhat opened. Actually, I will tell you that when I met Ruben at MIT, he helped interpret Tim's vision for me, because Tim has a brilliant vision for what the web could be, but the more prosaic way of getting there needed some figuring out. And so what brought me to Inrupt is I guess I felt that my modest skills haven't been developed along the way of how to bring resources and roadmaps and focus and so on to projects might help in regard to Solid. So we formed the company, moved to the center of gravity out of MIT, and the rest, I think, as they say, is history, but the rest is history in the making. So,
I wouldn't call it history too much. The red and the blue pill is from the movie The Matrix, in case you didn't realize. I don't know how many movies were made from The Matrix, but at least 3. So I don't know how many companies you sold before, but you have a long way to go then. Mr. Bruce Schneier, it's complicated having Bruce as a last name and Bruce's first name.
Oh, I assure you we know that. You're not the first person to notice that.
So you're a serial author, you're a globally recognized voice, an expert on cybersecurity. Tell me, how can we balance on the one side open data and on the other side have security of our data? Isn't that impossible to achieve?
Well, we do it now. I mean, right now we have a lot of data in public, and there's a lot of security around data. U.S. Census would be an example. I mean, this is actually, I think, a fundamental problem of the information age. And it's a really matter of group versus self-interest. Right? Our data is very valuable to society as a group entity, and it's also very personal. And the answer is going to depend a lot on the details of the data. And there's never going to be one answer to that. So let's take some easy examples. So I use Google Maps on my phone. Google Maps is fundamentally a surveillance app. It gives me good driving directions because everyone who uses it is under surveillance. So how can we balance that extraordinarily useful feature with privacy? I'm not going to make this up. The data is only valuable for 10 minutes. We can sample, we can get data from 1 out of 10 phones. We can completely anonymize it because we don't need to know who it is. Right? So that's maybe how I would do a navigation app. On the other hand, we could look at medical data, which I think is really incredibly valuable for society to be all in one place. I mean, the research that could be done on all of the United States, Europe, the planet's medical data, I think would be enormous. And that's incredibly personal. Now, I can't anonymize that, so it'll be a different regime. Maybe it is in a secure location. Researchers have to submit their queries in advance. They get their projects approved. There's contractual obligations for privacy. Completely different way of designing it. A third might be advertising data. We get a lot of free service on the internet in exchange for our advertising data. That's also incredibly personal, but there are ways we can secure that, which would be different yet again. So when you think about data and putting our data in one place and secondary uses and group uses, never think of one answer. Always think of a panoply of answers. I mean, another one's going to be U.S. Census data. There's something called differential privacy, invented here at MIT, which are mathematical models for adding noise to data in a way that preserves privacy, but you don't lose the statistical value. And we can go on. So I mean, that's the way to think about it. Never think of one answer.
So tomorrow we will create the MIT Joint Program app. We will put it on our smartphones. We start contributing to Mr. Schlosser's research, but it's open and everybody has access to it.
Were it that easy.
Were it that easy. So the more organizations have access to our data, the more people have access to our data. Doesn't it become inherently more insecure? How does it work? Please elaborate.
Who are you asking?
I'm asking you.
But the more people have that, the more complex the system is, the more risk there is. I mean, that's certainly true. And we have to recognize that the data in aggregate has value. I like it that I get driving directions that take into account traffic. I get it that you're all under surveillance, so I get that data. But that is a valuable trade-off. Now we have to do it securely. So it's less a matter of more access means less security or less privacy. It's that more access means we need to think about it more clearly. We need to actually understand what exactly we're accessing, why, and then build privacy and security into the system. U.S. Census did that in 2020.
The U.S. has a long tradition with open data and open government data, but if there's one domain where there's lots of data, it's probably climate change, it's probably temperature measurements going back hundreds of years,
Right.
Including in Belgium. So, Dr. Schlosser, where do you see improvement in that specific field of climate data? What would you like to see in the nearby future? Where can it improve still?
Give us your wish list.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. No pressure. Well, I'll start by saying that lack of air conditioning today, I think, is giving us a first-hand account of what we're facing.
It's sustainable.
Anyway, okay. Well, that being said, for starters, it's really just a granularity issue. So a lot of what we do to build models is we have to accept the fact that we represent the world in very discrete chunks. And those discrete chunks of space are simply because we have a lack of data at the granularity that we need to build those chunks. So in terms of just data that we need, if we simply had temperature data on your phone, if we had an instrument that told us temperature on a person-to-person basis, that's actually extremely valuable information. That would be probably one of the first things I would do. And even just add other very standard variables of measurement that you hear on the weather reports every night. Having that data at that spatial granularity and also being able to track where people are moving as that data is being measured and doing it in time will be very valuable. That would be my first wish list. Then from there, I think you get into some of the more probably sticky security issues, which is if we want to start thinking about predicting or bringing together all these different landscapes of risk, we have to start thinking about the fact of where are people going, what's their health, what are their habits, what are their behaviors, why do they make decisions to do certain things when they know they shouldn't be doing them that way. Hopefully these are pieces of information that we can garner at a phone or a smartphone by smartphone basis. I think there's a lot of sticky areas that go into that Bruce has mentioned, but it sounds like there is technology out there that would allow us to anonymize that.
Right, a lot of people, they focus their frustrations on the dominant technology companies. So yeah, I think that's a given right now, nowadays. But on the other hand, we're also very addicted to the convenience they provide. It's very convenient to have all the Google apps or whatever, access to your data everywhere. But the question is for Ruben, Professor Verborg. How would you like to see the control over data evolve in the nearby future?
What we fundamentally need is a different way to think about data. And that's maybe just as an example, like think about yourself. This morning, when you woke up, like who of the audience thought to themselves, what is my data going to do for me today? That's interesting. We don't think about how we spend our data. We think about how we spend our time, how we spend our energy, our focus, all of those things, how we spend our money. We just do those things. But there's so much data, we don't think how we will spend our data, how our data will work for us. I think fundamentally what we're doing is we're transitioning. So the idea of the past is big data, right? Which is the question of like, how can my data work for a handful of big companies? Today we're moving towards a more privacy-centric view, where it's like, how can we avoid that my data is working for other parties? And this is where many stop. But we need to go to the next step, which is empowerment. How can we make data work for us? So if I ask the same question again in a couple of years, I want people to have an answer. Well, my data is going to do these and these and these things for me today. And there's many different examples we can think. Let's say employment, for instance, right? If you're looking for a job, you always have to enter the same data again and again and again. It's annoying. It's annoying for you, but also for companies, because they have to ask for that data again and again and again. Think about healthcare. We lose millions every year in different countries from duplicate tests just because the originals can't be found or we don't even know that they exist. Imagine if we didn't do that. Well, that's less needles for me as a patient. It's cost saving for society. There's many examples like that where actually by making data flow better, by giving people the control to make it flow better, we can give them a better service, we can provide a better climate for innovation for companies. So fundamentally what we're talking about here is about how can we make data flow better? How can we make it work for people such that it benefits us as a society, but also the economy? Because there's so much data, so much potential that's not doing anything today. So that's for me fundamentally the question.
Any questions so far in the audience? Nobody would like to challenge them so far? Mr. Bruce? Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
I'm just curious, why are we talking about everything else except hashing the data?
But what are data?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I'm just curious, why are we talking about everything else except storing the data and hashing the data?
It's not.
Hashing the data.
So, I mean, sometimes that's useful, a lot of times that's not. I don't know, I mean, that feels like one of the many tech things we might do. So, I think we're talking at a higher level, is my guess why we're not talking about hashing.
We can take it offline further or at the end. Mr. Bruce,
Which would be
question for you. Your founding team is a very diverse one, very
Yep.
inclusive. You have a mixed European-American team. You're based here, but you also have a UK root kind of situation yourself.
You can tell by the accent, right?
Yeah, just a tiny little bit. But my question would be the following. Where did you see your first commercial traction with the company? Was it in the US? Was it here in Boston, Cambridge? Was it somewhere all the way in China?
Oh, was the question where did we first get the commercial interest? In Europe, actually. I will precursor what I'm going to say by telling you we have, until very recently, no salespeople, no marketing people. So, actually, one of our sales chaps, I think you've been 4 weeks in the job now, or so. Yeah. So anyway, so generally what we did was we were subject of a lot of attention when we announced what we were going to try to do, and principally because of who Sir Tim is and what he represents. And so what I tried to do is to pay attention to I guess you'd say the most appropriate inbound interest. And I thought that would be interest from governments and interest from major corporations. Corporations who had tens of millions of users and who could provision the technology in a way that gave pretty immediate value, actually, in pursuit of some principal value en route to the ultimate goal. And in the case of governments, I felt that there was immense utility in being able to treat citizens as one individual and consolidate numbers of government services in support of that individual as they went through life, in the context of life events. So they were the folks we paid primary interest in initially. And it was a sheer delight, actually, and I'm not just saying it because the man's in the room, but it was a sheer delight that Minister President Yambon got it. I mean, and the work that had been done as a precursor to this with folks like Raf and similar, who'd done work on projects like Oslo, and the work that had been going on at University of Ghent, made for a very fallow ground, actually, for the notion of what we could do together, and to find that we could mobilize together was enormously exciting. So the primary interest initially came out of Europe, and now is global. So I found myself this morning talking to the Indian government. Last week I was talking to the Australian government. We have interest in Asia. We have interest in a number of increasing countries in Europe, and corporates principally in UK and USA at the moment. But see above notes about we're just now beginning to mobilize sales and marketing. So we'll see.
Yeah, the fact that it's Europe, it shouldn't be surprising. I think Europe has a much more sophisticated view of data individuals, and Europe is really the regulatory superpower on the planet. And just because of that, there's more advanced ways of thinking about people and their relationship with data. You just don't see in the US because it's a regulatory free-for-all.
So it was the coincidence that was Europe. Was the coincidence, maybe John or you, Bruce, that it was Flanders? Like, what makes Flanders so special then?
That's it. You tell me.
I like the way you put it. A regulatory superpower. That's very positive to mention it. But moving on to the next question. So, Dr. Schlosser, your global program is global. You work with lots of partners worldwide. Which kind of European partners do you have? Which kind of European projects gets you excited or did you enjoy working on?
So a lot of the work that we do in terms of partnerships, so historically our program has been about 50% funded by US federal agency grants. So scientists like myself, we submit proposals and we get awards, and that's great. The other half of our research is supported by industry sponsors. And there's been a very strong contingent of our industry sponsorship that has been based in the EU. During my 20 years at the joint program was very heavily involved in the European trading carbon system when it was sort of just getting implemented. That was a very exciting time. Since then, we've primarily moved into, again, a lot of these areas of physical risks, transition risks, trying to work with companies, again, to give them strategies that help them understand that this is where they need to go in order to either transform their company to be, again, responsible with climate targets, sustainable development goals. Those are the sorts of areas that really excite us now.
We have 2 questions already. I believe you were first.
I have the impression that most of the speakers, not all, but at least 3 of them are referring, when talking to data, referring to personal data. But we know that now all the data economy is shifting, data in general, and most of the data we are getting or in terms of value are non-personal. And I would like to understand whether your conclusion so far can be changed if you look at this perspective.
So I don't think we mean to be talking about personal data only. I mean, but you're right. A lot of data is in situational data, environmental data. Right? So it's not personal. I don't mean to talk only about personal data. In a sense, the privacy issues are primarily involved with personal data. So the temperature and barometric data of this cell is not personal data. It can still be treated in the same way, but you're not going to have the same regulatory issues. But a lot of data that doesn't seem personal sometimes is. And data about electricity usage in your home is actually highly personal. Data about how objects move around your environment is highly personal. So it's not personal versus impersonal. There's a continuity of highly personal data, which will be, things on your smartphone that tell me who your intimates are and where you go. The things that are completely impersonal, which might be, temperature data in the Atlantic Ocean. And there's a lot of things in between. So it's not a hard split. So you think of it as a continuum.
Great. Thank you so much for the question.
I would just add one thing to that question, though, is that I would argue that a lot of the frontiers that I've touched upon in my talk probably reside more in the personal data side of things, I would argue, because they have a lot to do with human behavior and human tendencies, and that's where I think we have a lot of work to do.
So you have the feedback loop between the environment and the human.
Yes.
And that's what you need to measure.
That's what we need to measure. That's what we need to. So we need that spectrum of data.
Next, the questions lined up now. Everybody's waking up. I have
That's
four
good.
questions in my mind, but you should be very scared now because the next question is coming from Mr. Constant. He leads the National Data Authority, so I'll give the mic to Hans.
Excellent.
First of all, yeah, that's not an introduction I like, but anyhow.
I want you to be scary, though, so good.
Yeah, but no, I'm going to make you scared. No, just kidding. No, first of all, Mr. Jambon, I really like the audaciousness of the Flemish government to take that role, right? And together with the University of Ghent, Erik and Ruben, and go along right way back, but it's really great. Now, you asked a question, did I think about my data? I do think of that, not this morning, because I had to think about, I had a meeting at 3:20 ending at Takeda, and I had to be here at 3 p.m. That was on my mind, not my data. Anyhow, but it's a good question. And it's also together with what you also said, John, on this personalized data. So yes, Europe is taking a stake in putting the citizen in the ownership of the data. Solid is about the decoupling of data and applications in a secure and scalable way. Well, I have many questions. I'll ask one. Scalability and industry, because I'm a digital health entrepreneur. Not from Silicon Valley, but I'm from Flanders Valley. But I see Silicon Valley people are moving to Flanders Valley, so I see another pattern coming up. But the point is, think about biotechnology. Think about CRISPR-Cas and other technology, right? That's a huge amount of data. When can you scale this? Is this still research or is this industry? At what point can you scale putting my genomics in my pot and allowing bots to mine my mutations to do data-driven preventive care?
Well, if that's a direct question to me, I don't know that I could give you a projection in terms of 5 years hence. But we're actually working on a genomics project right now. I can't talk a lot about it, largely because A, it's confidential, and B, I don't quite understand it. But it's all about putting your genomics data in a pod, actually, and the utility of that. We've designed it, we've architected it, we believe it's safe and secure way to go about it. So very pointedly to the example you cited, I think it's one of the projects that I'm quite excited about. It's in Europe as well. I think to the broader question, though, which is about scale, actually, I think the easiest thing to scale of all of this is the technology, actually. We can stand up tens of millions of pods pretty quickly. We know how to operationalize that. We know how to manage that. It's all the layers of stuff above that I think where we still have challenges ahead of us. Some of the things we've grappled with on the regulatory landscape, on the legal landscape, and so on. And for those of you involved in the Flanders project, you'll know we've been very involved, very intensively involved, making sure this was all to be done in a way that was conformant and consistent with how one would want it to be done from a regulatory or legal perspective. So there's still some challenges ahead of us, I think, when we begin to scale it up. Most definitely when we go geo to geo. I mean, Europe's an interesting landscape. I mean, in as much as, there are so many nation states, there's a lot of uniformity or supposed uniformity around how everybody's supposed to act together. But if you consider how, not to pick on the UK, but if you pick on how will the UK now interact with Germany and Korea, South Korea, mate? I mean, there are considerations to be made now on a global scale, and I think we've still got, a good number of questions to figure out. Back to the issue of the technology, though, because on top of the technology, there's a stack. And actually, Ruben here is leading an initiative, or about to lead an initiative, on the elements of the stack. Because as I say, I think the technology clearly will scale. I mean, it's all the other issues around the technology that we need to figure out. But I wouldn't like to say we haven't got a clue. That's not the point. It's we have hypotheses about how to make it scalable for individuals like my 90-year-old mother, my kids, you, me. I mean, the scalability challenges in that too, right? From a usability perspective that we're grappling with. So lots yet to experience. But I think that, you know, the work that Ruben will do architecting the data layer stacks, I think that's going to be an important part of the consideration here. But we were talking about it earlier today, and there's maybe 5 years of work before we get to the point where we have total clarity or more clarity around that.
And a number of questions to be answered in the future. We have one more question, time for one more question before we need to excuse Mr. President.
Sorry.
Yes, Professor Mullins, please. Somebody with insider information. So if you can do it without the microphone, that would be great.
I want to make something clear. So together with Ruben, I read Solid. If you're talking about what kind of data, you know, Solid is all about the decoupling between data and services. What kind of data? It doesn't matter, right? So anything can be in a data flow. It is when the data is created with all the metadata around it, at that moment you are in control. So who is you? Can be a person, can be a house, can be a machine, can be a building, anything. So any data that you want could be put in some kind of tool.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So the last question before we excuse Mr. President is for you, Dr. Schlosser. MIT has a reputation, it has a history with influencing federal policy. What is the secret there? Could you give a short answer?
Good luck.
I think well, isn't it classified? If I tell you, then I'd have to kill you or something. Personally, myself, I have not had much experience in that, but I can tell you that over the course of the history of the joint program, the co-directors, the founding co-directors, Ron Prinn and Jake Jacoby, have had opportunities to speak directly with subcommittees and influence policy. And I think that extends also to a lot of the researchers, at least on the cutting edge of climate change research, but I can't speak for other areas. So. But I don't have any secrets, sorry. No.
That being said, please remain seated while we excuse Mr. President. Thank you so much for your time here today, for your support for this topic. And we will continue with the questioning of these four gentlemen. We will not let them go. So please remain seated, the rest of you. Thank you so much. Yes, I saw one more question.
I have two questions actually. Let's start. The first one is on identity. So if you're talking about more privacy ownership of your own data, letting it flow better, there's still going to be a problem because today identity on the internet is still a very fragile concept, and there's still a lot of companies and governments are struggling with it, both in the physical world, states social identity, number fraud is still very big, as well as online and identity theft, mailbox scams, etc. So how do you see any potential solutions for the concept of a more solid digital identity to authenticate yourself with in your bot or for your data or for the decisions that happen with your data?
Okay. I guess I can start. I mean, yes, that's a problem. I mean, so there are sort of two answers. One is Solid is orthogonal to that problem. I mean, it's not going to solve identity. It'll use existing identity solutions, right? So, I mean, OAuth is showing up. We have a new identity system that's rolling out, which doesn't use passwords. We don't know if that's going to be better or not, but there are going to be many different authentication systems, different identity systems, different systems of pseudonymity or anonymity. They all work with Solid, with these distributed data pods. And sort of our job is to build a system so it can use any of those systems. I think we try to push people towards more secure identity systems, but there are going to be users that don't want them. You know, you're going to do a 4chan clone that is going to use this, and you could. You're not going to want a secure identity system. You're going to want a sloppy one because that's what you like. So don't think of this as solving that. Think of this as using the identity solutions that are out there. There's a lot of research in secure identity that's working to do better. From national systems like Andhar in India to completely anonymous systems.
Right, thank you. And the second question was on the way to a new world where you own more of your data. There's a lot of companies that have a lot to lose, even if well, we can say that okay, there's still value in analyzing aggregated data, but we all know that there's a lot to lose for the Googles and Facebooks of this world. So how do you see them coping with this?
So, yeah, first of all, how many Googles and Facebooks do you know? Like, I don't know, one Google and one Facebook, right? So, there's a lot of companies that have a lot to gain from this because it's fundamentally a data-driven economy. So in order to innovate, you need data, and today to get data, you need to harvest it, which harms all of us. And it's not possible for many companies. Most companies, most reasonable companies, don't want to harvest data. They want to leverage data to give you a good service. They've got a customer, you're happy, and that's it, right? So this is what we're fundamentally trying to change. Plus, the data that's currently in Facebook, let's say, is data that works for them. It's data to give me good ads, basically, right? What I'm talking about is about empowerment. I want data that's working for me, to do things for me. Facebook doesn't have my health data, and they will never have it, right? But the data could work for me. Facebook doesn't have my calendar. Again, data could work for me, and so on and so forth, right? So we're fundamentally talking about different kinds of data, different kinds of use cases, and there are many more companies that have something to gain than those that have something to lose.
So Ruben is right. Facebook and Google are going to be the last users because they have these proprietary walled gardens and they want your data and they want to extract value. The real, the place this starts are governments that are trying to move in through services and the smaller companies that see this as an advantage. So don't think of Google and Facebook as the last, not the first.
Well, I wouldn't bet on that.
All right, second to last.
No, only as much as, it's funny, like I say, my last company I founded down, I don't know, 8 years, 9 years ago, whatever it was, and IBM bought it. And I found myself at IBM thinking, what am I going to do at IBM? And what happened was I got quite educated, actually, in as much as IBM's been a high technology business for over 100 years. Think of that. Over 100 years, they've been a high technology business. Think about if they stuck to their original model, they'd have been gone probably 85 years ago. But they keep inventing themselves. They keep evolving. And I'm not here to pitch IBM. I'm just saying, it's an example of a business that's extraordinarily capable, well-resourced, sees the writing on the wall that might exist, and adopts and changes and evolves and continues to it, versus all the ones that don't. And there's countless numbers of those. We could probably sit and brainstorm and rattle off 20 of them. And I think that, I wouldn't vote against. I don't know so much about Facebook, don't know them particularly well, but I do know Google quite well. And they're an interesting business. And I think, given the winds of change that are blowing, and they're increasingly significant, I wouldn't bet against big corporations saying, you know what, unless we get ahead of this, we have ourselves a bit of a problem. And so I don't know that I'd quite say that they're going to be the last people to do it. I don't think they're rushing to do it. But I think, it's clearly evident that it's going to happen. I don't know that I'm in Inrupt, though I'd like to believe that. But I do believe that we are all going to get much more control over what is rightfully ours. And organizations are rushing to that, actually. The ones we get a chance to talk to say, hang on a minute. So I don't need to take all of my consumers' data to provision my service, my products. And better yet, I could offer them an incremental service or an incremental product that today is impossible for me because I don't have access to it. Are you telling me I could do that? Answer yes. Well, then where do we go? Because how do we want? And so
I think we have a reaction coming from Dr. Schlosser. Would you like to compliment?
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you. You're on a roll there.
I'll roll for another 20 minutes, so don't worry about it.
Well, actually, this is a question to my fellow panelists here. As I'm listening to all this and my brain is sort of gravitating towards somewheres, I always like to think that we can have different answers for doing the same thing. So when we're thinking about this sort of transformative technology, where my brain tends to gravitate is One, this sounds like a very transformative system. And my brain also goes to the fact that the simple fact is that these systems consume energy. And I guess my question to the panelists here is, could we possibly view this as a transformation that introduces new technologies that are more efficient? They reduce, I think to the conversation that we had offline, it reduces repetition in data storage. It takes energy to store data. Mm-hmm. This may actually be a lower carbon, lower energy intensity technology, which is something I'm not sure if that's in the thinking, but it's certainly where my brain is thinking. I'm kind of curious to what is there a back of the envelope calculation that you could do that?
It makes a lot of sense in, like, my simplest explanation, what we're trying to do is we bring data closer to people.
Right.
And as it is, like with the carbon footprint and so, the problems come from products that come from far away, right? So conceptually, getting data closer to people makes a lot of sense for the environment as well, I would say.
We have only time for one more question from that one, and then I'll ask a final question.
Thank you. I want to take the discussion in a slightly different direction. We talked about a lot of the usage of data, us meaning the consumers, corporations of data users, but data is also used by politicians, by the government. And how do you deal with a situation where certain politicians do not understand the data, do not understand what the results are that the data tells them? Specifically for Adam Schlosser, where certain politicians that form public opinions profoundly refuse to accept that climate change exists. What do? Do you take an agnostic approach, saying, okay, this is not my task to form political opinion? Or do you say, like, no, this is actually something that concerns society, us as a whole, as planet Earth, so there's something I need to do that's beyond me as a researcher?
Solid doesn't solve human stupidity.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Let's not take that as a conclusion for.
I think that was well put, Bruce. But no, I think.
In the interest of time,
yeah.
there's lots of precious questions popping up here, but I have to ask the last question. I suggest we keep 5 minutes for drinking some water, and then we do have part of the group that wants to go to the next program item. So.
Do I get 30 seconds to answer that question or no?
Give him the time.
Okay, please.
I will just say that, to your point, there is a portion of this in community that we're trying to inform and educate. It doesn't matter how much information you're going to throw at them. It's just stubbornness. I will say that I think that there is a large fraction of the population that are educated, that want to be educated, and want to be educated in a way that gives them access to the information that allows them to make their own assessment. I think there's a reluctance to believe what is said or what is maybe processed on the internet that they get access to. I think they want the raw data, and that's where our mission lies. I don't know if that was 30 seconds or not.
That was perfect. So, in the English language, they have a nice word. It's called being a change maker. Anybody heard of that in the Belgian delegation? A change agent, a change maker, which is more active. So, if we all start today becoming a change maker, my question for the panel would be the following: what year do you predict that the internet is balanced again, that our data governance is balanced again? Short answer, please. Powerful, so that we can go invigorated, have a sip of water before we go to the next program item. Thank you.
Well, I think it's above my pay grade. I mean, smarter men than me on the panel here could take a swipe at it. But the good news is we're underway. And it always starts with the first steps. So we're already underway.
I won't answer that question on a technical or engineering basis. I will just put it on the basis of what I've presented, and I think that if we want to transform how we access data so that we can make better decisions, we better do it by 2030.
I will duck it as well. I think we're actually, it's very difficult to predict dates of future adoption, especially when it's not just technical, it's socio-technical. I mean, we're talking about the interplay of tech and people and society, and that is sort of a double uncertainty that makes predictions hard.
Innovation is never done, it's continuous. We have to keep on doing it.
Right, so nobody answered your question.
I gave a year anyway.
At least he has numbers in his answer.
I will tell you this, though, just as one last comment. I will tell you this, and it's a true story. On my laptop, my screensaver is a quote I like, and it says, "As for the future, your job is not to predict it, it's to enable it. And that was from the Prince. The little Prince, that's a great quote. And that, I live by that, actually. To whatever degree I can, anyway. But
Thank you so much.
My computer says, would you like to update it Windows 11? And the answer is no. The answer is no, by the way.
Let's give a very warm applause to Mr. Maximo. We'll take Max and Horacio, please come on stage. We'll take a picture before we get our dessert bingo on. You can all go to the refreshments bar before you leave. The next program item will be offshore wind.
Good to meet you guys. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
I love what you're doing. It sounds interesting.
I was going to say the same thing. It'd be great to have a little exchanging of the minds up and down. Going down to Charles.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
I mean,
well, they know where to find. I can Google you.
Yes, you can.
Ready for a picture? So
Ready for a picture.
Oh, come back.
Otherwise, you're protected in the face.
Yeah, you don't want that. Yeah, better. The boss key. You know? You want the background?
Thank you so much.
can I just shut it off?
Outstanding. I always have an audio experience.